first got into recovery, there was a gentleman in a hospital nearby, Smokey the cab driver, who ended up becoming my first sponsor, but he ran the addiction unit at Rockville General Hospital. And the first thing he ever did was hand me a beeper. That's how long ago that was, a beeper.
Wow, yeah.
And when the number went off, it was the emergency department, and they said, basically, we have a live one. Can you come down and help us out? And that was my training. And what they're really asking is for another person in recovery to de-escalate a situation in the emergency department, yet the only tools we had in our tool belt were we could take them to a 12-step meeting, or if they had the right insurance, they could go to a 28-day rehab. So fast forward several years, and I'm working at CCAR. So for 15 years, I told that story or a similar version of that story. For a couple years ago, I told the right people, and funding came our way, and we were able to implement this emergency department recovery coaching program. Now, we estimate that if you showed up in an emergency department with an addiction issue or an alcohol issue, that you might get connected to ongoing care for that addiction, maybe what? 0 to 2% of the time, maybe 5%.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, most people say probably wasn't going to happen.
Correct.
And that's really not the fault of the emergency department. They have to move people through that system.
Correct.
People keep showing up over and over again, and they don't really know how to address it, or haven't been trained even to address it. Then emergency department recovery coaches, you put a coach in there, we're able to connect people to care. And, I thought if we could improve on that rate, we'd be helping a lot. Our numbers are still above. We've seen 1,500 people in roughly the 18 months or so we've been doing this. That was probably March. Yeah, about 16 months we've been doing this. And we've connected more than 95% to ongoing care.
I also, Sherpa program, same numbers. 96% go to want treatment. So the numbers that first came back from the emergency room department saying, oh, these people don't want help, is not necessarily true. Right. It's the language. It's having the ability to have time. It's the ability to have time to speak to someone with the right words. Did we lose? Bill, can you hear me? No, there you are.
I can't. Yeah. So you're coming in and out, so I don't know what that's about. So
you're clear.
All right, good. So we're about really that whole idea of people being treated as resources. I mean, when you treat them like a person, like an object, they're not going to get the help. They're just going to feel that. So when you ask them that simple, magical recovery coach question, how can we help you with your recovery today?
Yes.
It changes everything. And I think the personnel within the emergency departments are really surprised that the people know what they want to do and are willing to do it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's also, sometimes not everybody wants to go directly, that straight line to recovery. So,
right.
Staying in contact, speaking their language, meeting them where they are, so vitally important.
Yeah, we had seen a couple other programs that were running across the country, and when we put ours together, we really wanted to add this ongoing contact, the telephone recovery support.
Yes.
So for 10 days after the initial contact, we say in our programming that we'll contact people 6 times a minimum, but we contact them usually every day for the next 10 days if they're available and all that, and we check in with them. And on the rare occasion people don't want help, it's a pretty high percentage that people keep that number in their phone or keep the information that we have given them. And it might be a week later, it might be a month later, but they call back and say, I think I'm ready to go do something.
And same experiences. So, people are the same, so can this work? Absolutely. And what
Yeah.
we're also adding is that other dimension of working with the family. So sometimes, right, the person struggling doesn't want the help. But if we can, really scoop up the family and give them their own tools and resources, then they can be on their own separate road to recovery, especially if there are other siblings in the house that may be younger. So important to change the dynamic. And when things change at home and manipulation starts to shut down and other doors start to close, magically the person struggling might,
Yeah.
not be so resistant anymore.
And it's just when we do the academy and family members come through, a lot of times we're just giving them the tool to ask good questions, to really listen to a person, ask good questions, kind of put your stuff and your blame and judgment aside, and really talk to the person and find out what that person needs or wants or desires. If the question is not, how can I help you with your recovery today, it might be, what would recovery look like for you?
Right.
And how could I help you with that, or whatever it may be?
And,
Are you interested?
right. But, when,
Hmm?
when mom and dad let go of this is what you should be doing. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't very freeing for mom and dad, and then very encouraging to the person that's there, whether it be a spouse, whoever that is. When you let go of what they're supposed to do and clean up your own side of the street and treat them as a resource. I love that terminology. I think that hits the nail right on the head.
And that's one of our basics, isn't it? Treating
Yes.
people like resources. And how do we do that? We ask good questions, we actively listen, we manage our own stuff, like I just mentioned. And I really think the two key things are being curious about a person. So if you're curious, your stuff's not in the way. You're just asking questions about, explain to me, talk to me, what's going on? I want to know. I want to figure out if there's a way we can help each other or whatever it may be. And that makes all the difference in the world. Because you've heard me say oftentimes that addiction is one of the primary symptoms of addiction is isolation.
Yes.
And the more you become addicted, the more you isolate. And so if you can establish connection, that's an antidote to addiction. And that's what coaches offer, is that connection.
Yes.
We just have to be better at connecting to people, with people on a real intimate level. And like Art Woodard always says, it's intimacy is into me you see. So it's kind of this, let's make ourselves a little vulnerable, let's connect with each other, and that's where healing can begin.
And because, somebody who's really struggling with substance use has closed many doors with many different people. And by just being a heart, I like to think of it like that way, a best friend, a heart with ears. I'm just gonna be your friend. I'm just gonna show you some love. I'm just gonna, let's see what we can do to help you with your recovery today. And it's magic words.
Yeah.
And they're not difficult words, are they? It's not brain surgery. That's the interesting part.
Well, it's the coaching too. It's the coaching part is being an encourager, a motivator, a cheerleader. It's to do all of those things that people who have struggled with addiction, who may have landed in several treatment places or the emergency rooms or burned a lot of bridges, they're not getting a lot of encouragement or a lot of kind words.
No,
not at all. So
if they make a mistake,
the game.
They're often, thrown out of treatment. So that's very interesting.
Right.
I'm here because I struggle with substances, drugs and alcohol, and if I do one of those things and I slip up while I'm in treatment, I'm thrown out of treatment. So that just never makes sense to me at all.
I first heard Bill White say that addiction is classified as a chronic relapsing illness. That's why it's called a disease. It's chronic, and it keeps repeating unless you take care of it. And so when somebody uses in a treatment setting, he says, and I agree, that the system kicked him out for confirming the diagnosis. And
Exactly.
it's the only condition that happens. I mean, if you were in, you were in for trouble or something like that. If you had heart pains, they're not going to kick you out.
No,
They're going to
they're
treat
not. But
right.
yeah, but they do with, people that struggle.
And they,
It's asinine. It's
well,
absolutely ridiculous.
it's that factor of perceived choice. So after 30 years of recovery, I have a choice today to pick up or not pick up. When I was actively using, that choice was practically removed. My body needed it, my mind needed it, my mental condition, everything. I thought that was the thing that was saving my life, were the substances. And I'm not unique there. So it's this idea of people losing their choice that's really hard for a lot of people to understand, that when you're actively addicted, that the more you use, the more that choice factor disappears.
Absolutely.
Something dramatic happens. And so that's always been the common, it's been a myth that why don't people just stop? Why can't they just stop? Well, they just can't.
They just can't.
If it was that easy, they would.
If it was that easy, we wouldn't have any obese. Nobody would struggle with overweight, right? Because you could just stop and not eat all the things that bring you a lot of pleasure, right?
That's
so it's
true.
the same thing, and I tell people, my 21-year-old didn't choose to die at the ripe old age of 21. That was not a choice. It was a physical demand on his body that every cell in his body and his brain needed that drug.
Yeah.
And no one can really appreciate that demand unless someone who has been through that, who has lived through it, whether through being associated with it. Everyone knows someone that struggles with substance use, which also goes to, right, eating disorders, gambling, hoarding. There are many things that fit that bill, not just drugs and alcohol.
I think it was Gabor Mate, a doctor, that talks about addiction being any behavior that is self-soothing or self-satisfying or self-gratifying, that you keep repeating it and then it becomes a problem. And I think I don't know that there's anyone that can't relate to that, whether on any level. It doesn't have to be to the degree of like a heroin addict that's really stealing and all that, but people can understand that you start doing something for so long, then you say, this isn't working for me anymore.
Right.
And you know why. When did that switch? When did that change?
Right, exactly. When did it switch? When did it be, I could just stop on a Friday night to now I have to be somewhere every night of the week, all hours of the day, and it's interfering with every aspect of my life.
Well, recently I've had a similar thing playing Golf Clash. Do you know what Golf Clash is?
No.
It's a little internet. It's an online game where you actually play this kind of golf against other people, and I'm like, this is really starting to draw me in, or maybe taking up a little too much of my time.
Well, but now we look at it. People can't put down their cell phones. They can't get away from their social media. That takes up hours upon hours of their day.
It's an escape.
It's an escape. Yeah. It makes them feel better to think of whatever it is that they're doing is better than what they're actually living through or giving, so how can you criticize and judge someone who just does drugs and alcohol? It's the unending education of the American public that has to continue to happen.
Mm-hmm. My friend and colleague, John Hamilton, I first heard him say this, that people only use substances or partake in these behaviors for only two reasons, and it's to feel good or to feel better.
Yes.
And so it doesn't, the whys don't really matter, or it's not really all that important. It's to feel good or to feel better. So when I think about the first time I ever picked up alcohol, it made me feel wonderful. And from that point on, I felt, it just to feel good. It made me
Yeah.
feel good. But then as I got older and I had some what I think might be social anxiety, I found that, I was very nervous, anxious, couldn't really talk to anybody. You might find that hard to believe
I do
now.
find that hard to believe.
I couldn't talk to anybody, and especially girls. Oh my God, I'd break out in the sweats. However, if I drank some alcohol, I thought I was becoming, like real smooth and all that. But I was not, but it made me feel better.
Yes.
And that was that. So what started out as making me feel good, I felt terrible, and this would just make me feel better. And so I think that's also the story for many people, whether you have past trauma
Yes.
that you don't know how to deal with, that you just feel better when you do these things or whatever they may be. It's a coping mechanism.
Without a doubt, it's a coping mechanism. And
Yeah.
nobody picks up heroin the first time out. So,
Right.
it just escalates to that point when that switch is turned on in your brain. But, when we look at society and the average onset for a boy is age 10, and now the national age for a girl is 11 and a half. What have we done to make things so uncomfortable for children to feel good or to feel better or to escape? So that's just another question that really boggles my mind. Because at 10 years old, 11 years old, I can tell you this, that's the last thing that I was thinking about.
Yeah, I was 13 when I had my first kind of drunken escapade. And I don't really know why, but looking back, there was some family things going on, that my parents ended up getting divorced, that I wasn't really able to put my finger on. It wasn't awful in my home. It just, it wasn't, there was no violence or anything like that, but it wasn't the loving, nurturing home that Sandy and I have tried to build, and that care for your children. So, it's really, again, that we were isolated a lot as kids.
Yes.
And we weren't really connected as a family. And so maybe that's, addiction had a foothold that way. And I was very lucky that I always got into other drugs after I'd been drinking.
Okay.
And I was very lucky that I was never around heroin. It just never happened. I got into the cocaine and the marijuana, and I was in the 80s with the Escobar cocaine and the big things, and that was everywhere. But I just never, I knew of people that were doing heroin here and there, but I just never, for God save me, I don't think I would. I'd be alive if I ever found it.
Many people in recovery say the same thing. They said, if heroin was around, I would have done it, and I probably wouldn't have lived through it. So, yeah, that's, so is it any surprise that we're losing a generation of these young people? Really, it's just insidious.
Yeah, it's almost when you're kind of like a soldier in this battle and being an advocate and declaring, trying to be a voice, and sometimes you feel like you're a voice in the wilderness.
Yes.
You just raise the alarm bells and ask for help and other solutions. And can't you see what's going on? It's a hard road we walk a lot of times. We take a lot of shots, and you've taken the toughest one of all. So
Yeah.
always admire your courage and your willingness to continue to for your son,
going up and being an advocate and really getting some real dollars for the foundation to do this work, that at least that the lawmakers now or the senators are listening and saying, we have to do something different because everything we keep doing and funding isn't working. So, now doing this and really showing numbers and bringing, really funneling the services directly to the people instead of having layers of bureaucracy in some of these, in what just happens in bureaucratic, you know, organizations. I'm just, let's just cut through all of that and just get it straight to people. Because we know better. We know better. We know what works. So let's do it. Stop talking about it. That's what makes me insane. You keep talking about, let's have a meeting and see, what should we do about the heroin opiate crisis? Really? What else do you want to know what we should do?
Right. Don Koyas from White Bison often talks about your system is perfectly designed for the results it's getting. And
wow.
And I think that's what a lot of legislators and policymakers are starting to understand.
Absolutely.
Our system is perfectly designed for the results it's getting, and we're losing too many young kids. So, and it's not one solution. A lot of the meetings I sit in on talk about the use of medication. And I've always believed in, since, as a Recovery Coach Academy came into existence, in multiple pathways of recovery.
Yes.
Which medication can be a tool to put people on a variety of pathways that will maintain and sustain recovery. It can be used to initiate recovery, but it's not a magic pill. A Suboxone dose or methadone dose or whatever you have is a tool for to assist in long-lasting recovery. I'm fully in support of Narcan or naloxone to revive people. As a matter of fact, just yesterday we had someone revived in one of our centers, the first one ever.
Wow.
To down a bathroom door, and our staff was pretty rattled, but they handled it beautifully. Thank God we had the Narcan kit in the center.
Absolutely.
And thank God there were advocates for that to really insist that we have these, because, as they say, a person who's died can no longer get into recovery.
That's it. Once the people, navigating the system with my son and having people say, well, he's not high enough for treatment, or the best, he always needed to fail at something before he would get escalated to another level of care. So, well, he certainly failed. So we accomplished that. But there's no coming back from failure in this disease. It is a fatal progressive disease if left untreated.
The system does not do a very good job of matching the dose of treatment with the severity of the addiction.
Correct.
So and that's just what you described. So why does one thing have to fail? I mean, when I had cancer, they went after the most, it was cancer of the tongue, metastasized to my throat, and lymph nodes in my throat. And then they went after the most aggressive form that they thought I could withstand, which I was in pretty good shape at the time, so it was pretty aggressive. But we don't kind of think that way. Let's try the easiest, least expensive thing, and if that doesn't work, then we might try something else. But we don't go after it aggressively, oftentimes.
There's the old kill the dragon in the egg. So, if we really put some great care right up front, long-term care. It used to be way back right in the 70s, 18 months for a heroin addiction. And there was success there. So what was it? Was it the treatment was different, or was it the length of treatment and really being away from everything and really be able to concentrate on that? The longer term, you can't expect to change a teenager's brain in 7 to 10 days. It's not going to happen. It's impossible.
Well, I think all the scientific data, this is the thing that's pretty infuriating. They say there's two factors that have a great influence on outcomes. That's the length of stay. And that was the first thing that kept getting cut shorter and shorter and shorter. So if you had the ability to stay for 18 months, whether it was in one of those old therapeutic communities or a live-in place, your chances were really, really good.
Yes.
And the other part was this idea called therapeutic alliance, which we already talked about, which was the greater the connection with the people, more likelihood that success for successful outcomes. But we've abandoned both of those in a lot of ways.
It's because follow the money, right? Phil, we're going to
Yeah.
take a break, and we're going to be right back in a few minutes.
Was that 27 minutes already? Or
That was 27 minutes, so I'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
My age is 18 years old and my name is Evan.
My name is Sean and I'm 19 years old.
My name is Justin, I'm 16.
My name is Angelica, I'm 18 years old.
Marijuana, and I was 13 years old.
Marijuana, and my age was 13.
The first drug I ever tried was marijuana, and I was 12 years old.
It was marijuana and I was 11 years old.
Yes, and that escalated to promethazine, lean.
I began to take pills like Xanax, Percocets.
I began using other substances such as pills and alcohol.
I then went on to cocaine and pills and quickly progressed to heroin. I was 13 years old when I first started using heroin. I had like aspirations of going to like an Ivy League school, and that quickly, within like a year or two, changed. I stopped going to my classes, I stopped going to school altogether eventually. All my friends were kind of just dropping me.
I started getting in trouble in school, eventually kicked out. I got in trouble with the law a lot.
I wasn't really hanging out with a lot of sober people, just people that use. I overdosed at 15. I've been at Outreach for 5 months. Outreach honestly really helps you. It shows that you're honestly worth something. And it's possible to become sober if you put in progress. But it's not just gonna be handed to you, you really have to want to change. Inpatient, you can't just leave. You stay here and you have to deal with it. That's what I feel like a lot of kids need.
In a long-term facility, the counselors get to know the resident better, and they get to actually work with them more than in a short-term 28-day facility. And it really gives kids a chance to work on themselves rather than being rushed through a program, just to be thrown back into life, going back into the same old bad habits that they were doing before.
Coming in here, I couldn't believe how long I would have to be here, but after a couple months, like, you know, talking to counselors, I kind of came to the realization that, like, I need a lot of time and work to repair everything I've done.
The things that we get taught here, you know, it really does help you in life, and it gives you a different perspective. It's very important for a kid to have a family involvement in treatment so they don't think they're alone in this. We communicate on a better basis than how we used to. We understand each other more, and that was from the help of Outreach.
They come every Wednesday night for support group. They come to a group every other week.
They come to peer support group to discuss their problems also. My relationship honestly has got a lot better, because I remember my mom used to never want to say anything to me because she would be scared of my reaction. I'm starting to realize in here, like, I really have to take advantage of the fact that I have her still.
When I was about 14 is when my parents realized that I had several different problems, such as behavioral issues, and the behavioral issues kind of stemmed from my drug use. I began caring less about myself and others. Outreach has really made me realize how important family is. If I was out of state in a program where my parents were not involved, I would have never been able to strengthen my relationship with them. My father told me that I've inspired him to make changes in his life, and that meant a lot to me. I've never heard my dad be inspired by something before, and I was just proud that it was me.
Recovery. And Phil, are you there?
I am.
Hey, Phil. So we were just talking, what's so interesting to me is you described going, the start of your disease, and when you talk to people today, nothing seems to change. All the same reasons for picking up to, feel good or feel better.
Yeah.
It just never seems to change. It's a human condition. So I think we just need to nothing has to be as difficult as people make it to be. So I think we
Right.
have to, just agree that we are a society that really has lost touch with human interaction on many different levels. Balance, the balance of enjoying life with, the demands of working.
I would agree with you. I think that's a big factor in why so many people are so addicted is the lack of connection, and it is sad and it's a concern. However, you look at all of that, there's still a tremendous vanguard of people that are trying to bring this healing and hope to the world,
Yes.
and
And that's
they're
growing.
yes, it is.
It's growing.
And I even think, like, I look at the way my kids, I have 5 kids ages 30 to 13, and they don't react the same way to things like social media the
Okay.
way that maybe some adults do or other kids do. There's a lot of kids that use it as a tool, a lot
Yes.
like we use the telephone. They use it to text, let people know where they are, to keep in touch with each other. But it doesn't drive their lives. They're still very eager to connect with each other and hang out together and go to people's houses, and that's encouraging. So I think there's a lot of good. We focus on all this devastation, but again, like you were saying, it's that word balance of how do we balance these things? How do we make use of social media? How do we make use of the technology we have? Look at what we're doing. We're kind of on this Skype call.
Exactly. So
trying to
it is,
connect
it can
the
be,
world.
I have my youngest son chooses not to be on any social media. Does he text? Absolutely. Does he like to look at, other things more like Pinterest, different sites that can bring
Yeah.
ideas to him? But the whole thought of following somebody's life on, because it's all, he'll tell you straight out, it's just all baloney, that's not real life. That's not what they're really doing. So,
Well,
who cares?
I was just listening to. Oh yeah, actually, there was a young man who I followed at our church who gave a message on Sunday, and he talked even about the Instagram picture where being in a coffee shop and was getting a latte just perfectly with the croissant broken off and a piece laying over the edge, and like it's the perfect picture for the perfect life. And that's what you post on Instagram. They don't they want to post the perfection of your life. Look how good everything
Look how
is.
good it doesn't look like my coffee that's spilled halfway, on my way down the driveway while I'm getting in my car. Nobody wants to
I
see
know.
that.
So,
It's that illusion.
so
Everybody wants to create the illusion of their perfect world. And you know what? I'm perfectly good with saying, wow, I had a few difficulties this morning, and that's okay, because that's life. Because
and
that's
that's also
everybody's life.
that's also being a coach. And I'm curious to hear. You guys are doing some great work. You're going to be training coaches yourself.
Yes.
I'm so proud that you're going to be training because you'll be a great trainer. Um, and we have had incredible success at our recovery community centers, where these places where people come out, people in recovery, family members, friends, and allies. They're all welcome, and they come with that recovery theme in mind, and they do things together, and they support one another's recovery. What's going on with you? How are you looking at recovery community centers, and
So
what's your
we have
yeah
Thrive,
yeah
and that's just growing by leaps and bounds.
yeah
And to be able to watch people in recovery be led by people in more sustained recovery is so amazing to, to really see them find their mode to recovery. So there are many pathways. So to watch them, whether they choose art or music or other things or nature or, physical activity or whatever it is, to have a place for people to go that can be with other people that are walking the same road as them. But it is also just so wonderful to watch the interaction for families to come back together that really have been so destroyed, by so many things, to watch them learn how to communicate together in a safe environment that everyone feels safe. So we need to build more of them. The Recovery Center is only, if you're not accompanied by a parent, then you have to be, 18 or older. So we need to get some more kid clubhouses, I believe, because we tell kids, not to be doing other things. Well, they need to have a place where they can do other things.
What are you seeing as some of the pathways that are most being used in your area?
So that's interesting because, some people are very attached to 12-step programs, and but what I see with a lot of younger people, that they are not so drawn to the 12-step because they don't like the strictness of it, or sitting like that, or being with older people, or whatever it's meeting them where they're at too. So learning, because I've had such an education since my son passed. So, people, I didn't know what I didn't know with him, but it's so amazing to me to bring other things forward and say, this is, let them find their own way, because it could be Buddhism. It could be so many other pathways for them, but whatever's going to stick, let them throw it all against the wall, and whatever that sticks to them, they're going to stay with, right?
I agree, and it's evolved a lot for me over the years from kind of faithful attendance to 12-step meetings to all recovery meetings, which embraces all forms of recovery. But when I start to get a little squirrely, as my AA sponsor might say, or halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I was feeling that way yesterday. So I've really found it in the woods, that I take my dog buddy for a walk in the woods, a nice quick 3-4 mile, work it out physically. By the end, I'm so much better. I mean, when I hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2015, I did the whole thing, 2,189 miles, is a time when I really connected and my recovery really solidified. To me, recovery and my higher power are kind of almost interchangeable.
Yes.
If I'm connected well with him, then I'm okay.
Yes.
And I think that proven over the years to be the source for many, many people in long-term sustained recovery is some type of faith, some type of connection. And it's not up to me to define that either.
Exactly. So I had this young man up at St. Joseph's one time, and we were talking, and I'm spiritual. I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual. And we were talking, and all along those things, and he was really spilling his guts to me. And then he took a rock out of his pocket, and he said, this is my higher power. So it really was kind of nature, but I still have that rock. And he put it in my hand, and he said, this reminds me of you, that you are, weathered, that you can sustain through storms and still come out. And it meant so much to me from where he was coming from. And I said, don't try to fit in. You have something deep inside of you. Just go with that. And I'll never forget, he goes, nobody ever said that to me before. And that was
Right.
long before coaching, it was just something so innate to me to say, dude, you have your higher power. Don't let anybody else define it for you.
Mm-hmm.
You've defined it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things when you talk like that, there will be many people so the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in and of itself is non-threatening, because
Yes.
the program, the book, the things that's written, or any 12-step program, it's non-threatening. It's the program is really take what you need, leave the rest. If you want to do the steps, great. And if they work for you, I know I did, my life got a lot better. And it continues to improve 30 years down the road. However, when you start to mix in all the people
Yes.
that think that those steps ought to be done a certain way, or they have their certain beliefs about whether if you're on this medication, you're not really in recovery, and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah.
and that's the sad part about that. Who's to say, someone taking medicine-assisted treatment that's keeping them alive and they're not shooting heroin certainly isn't in recovery for me, right?
Sure.
They're working on their path to wherever it is where they're going, not where you're going or where you went. Leave them alone.
That's the key to coaching is, can you support all these pathways? And really, if someone's on medication, I just ask them, how do you feel about that? Are you in recovery? Do you think you feel you're in recovery? And if they say sure, I say wonderful. I mean, I was just at a training a woman who was in 30 years of 30-something years, maybe 40, but it's on medical marijuana now because she says it's the only thing that works. Now all the things go off in my head, go like warning, warning, Will Robinson.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking that I was really just very curious of how's that working for her, and it seemed to be working fine. But I don't think that's a risk that I personally would want to take. But
Correct.
it's her recovery, and who am I to say one way or another? And it doesn't really affect me one way or another either.
No, it doesn't. That's the
Yeah.
key. That's where that's where I think people need to find balance.
Yeah.
Live your life. Let somebody, you don't have to agree with them, but you can't
Right.
shoot them down for what
Right.
they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's many ways to get from A to B.
We talk about that a lot in the Recovery Coach Academy, and the example I often give is that my personal recovery that's worked now for 30 plus years is I am abstinence based, that I don't want to take any alcohol or any other drugs that's not prescribed by a physician for a certain condition. I'm not going to do it. It's also really rooted in the 12 steps.
Correct.
Because
Yes.
that's for me. I'm just talking for me. And that 12 steps led me to a higher power, which I have defined as my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So that's me. And I also use the Bible and I use the Christian tenets to help me lead my life. Now, my question that I was posed to the group, and you heard me do this, is if as a recovery coach, I believed everyone needed to get into recovery that way, that specific pathway, how effective would I be?
You wouldn't.
Right. I would be for that part of the population that had already figured all that out, right? Which early in recovery, that's probably a very small slice of the pie.
Very small slice of the pie.
So
yes.
I want to be effective. I want to just say, I'm comfortable with who I am, but I'm also comfortable with who you are. And I'm very curious about who you are and what you believe and what you're doing. And I can support, care, and dare I use the L word, love you for who you are and where you are. Because that's what I'm called to do anyway. That's what my faith tells me to do. My faith doesn't say I have to convert you or do any of that.
Correct.
All I have to do is care about you.
So I agree with you. My higher power is Jesus Christ, and I'm not ashamed, nor do I apologize to speak of him. So sometimes it's very interesting when I speak to people that are in treatment, and I talk about my higher power, and they'll say, well, he doesn't know where I live. I go, oh, he's waiting for you, but you may have to talk to him. And, you know, because I think, you know, for me, when I just say, I'm not mad at God, you know, that he didn't tell Thomas to do what Thomas did, but it's certainly our journey together that I just say, listen, you know, my son walks in paradise. I know that for me. So it's our journey. So people get curious with that. You know, it's just go talk to him and see what he has to say for you or not. And that's okay by me too.
Yeah.
I'll have enough faith for all of us to get through.
And I also love what my sponsor taught me. He said, it took, and this is he's a real intellect, like a real thinker, explorer. He would say seeker, truth seeker, if you will. And it said it took him 18 years of actively seeking. He's got 42 years of recovery now, 43 this year. But after 18 years, he finally came to the conclusion that God knows what he's doing. And which sounds funny to say it, but I think I might have been a little longer to really embrace that idea that God does know what he's doing. I might not agree. I definitely don't understand. And I've gotten to the point in my life and in my walk that I'm okay with that. You know, that I don't have to understand. I don't have to know everything.
I say that I don't need to understand anything, but sometimes, you know, what is that? You know, if we were to look at our lives looking upwards, you would see the underneath of a rug or a tapestry, and it's not till you get to the other side that you can see the perfect pattern for each one of us. So,
I like that. That's sweet.
That's right. So I just say, whatever it is, you know, sometimes though, when you look back, you can say, oh, I get it. Because, you know, even for me right now, with just doing what I've been doing, and it's not me opening doors, I know that that's him, and I'm just bold enough to walk through, that everything that I, you know, wanted to accomplish is being accomplished, not in my time, in his time, because that's the perfect timing. So I would run ahead and he would knock me back. And I'm okay with that. So now I'm just like, all right, you're in charge. I get it.
I think too, what's also encouraging for me is that as a leader of a recovery community organization, we're at a high water mark as far as number of staff. We're at 30 staff now, which is kind of unbelievable to me. But you have a choice as a leader of an organization to either be faith-based or fear-based. And when I say faith-based, I'm not talking about, you know, you have to subscribe to a certain faith and follow that, put that. It's more about having faith in your mission, faith in the people that work for you, faith. So instead of restricting our recovery coaches, we trust our recovery coaches. So instead of like saying you have to have a certain amount of clean time or you have to have been addicted to be a recovery coach, no, this is open to all.
Yes.
We don't even have education requirements for our coaches. It's if you are good at connecting with people and can manage some things, you're an ideal candidate.
Yes.
And that's all based on faith that we are going to trust our coaches to do the right thing. I'm seeing like within the systems that are getting the results that they're designed to get, that they operate out of a place of fear. You have to have 2 years of recovery. What's magical about 2 years? I don't get that. You have to be in personal recovery. Really? Why?
Right.
Can a family member or a mom like yourself make an excellent recovery coach? What? I don't get it. But this is all attempts to control. It's also attempts to control, which is fear-based, when you require that they have to have pass a written test to get a certification. Will somebody explain to me how a written test is evidence that you can go out and coach somebody well.
It,
Somebody
there isn't.
explain that to me. I don't know. I don't care if the psychologist I see, or the counselor I see, or the executive coach I see, if they passed a test to get their degree. I don't really care. Can they connect with me? Can they ask me really good questions to get me to think? And that doesn't
Absolutely.
yeah.
And that's the name of the game. It's that willingness to connect with people. Because you know what? Being a coach, especially in a crisis situation in the emergency room, you're dealing with some very tense situations most of the time.
And some moving parts.
It's a lot of moving parts. The ability to think on your feet, not to get rattled, and to be able to stay present with someone going through probably the worst day of their life at that moment in time. So, there's no requirements for that. You could be the smartest person in the world and be inept at doing that.
I agree. I think also that also really goes to the art of recovery coaching we talked about.
I was waiting for you to come up with the art. I love that saying, because everybody's got a different style.
That's their own art of recovery coaching. You can't train everyone to be a recovery coach, and even when you provide really good training, you're going to rely on their own personal art, their own personal intuition, their own ability to care to really drive a situation. So in those chaotic emergency department settings, a lot of fear-based people think, well, they're going to do damage, they're going to do this. And if you're an administrator, some of the programs I've seen are all outcomes measures. We freed up our coaches by saying, you know what we want you to do in the emergency department? Plant a seed of hope. Can you do that? And they're like, yeah, I can do that. I said, then everything else will follow.
Yes.
That's their primary purpose, is just to be a ray of hope, a beacon of light. I don't want to get too corny, but it's kind of like just to be there and say, recovery is possible for you.
Yes. Maybe not today.
Right.
That may not be your choice today, but that's okay. But they do remember who you are. And
Yes.
I get calls from much later. I remember what you said, because once it's been said and that seed has been planted, listen, for me, my higher power told me a long time ago, you don't water the seeds. I'm not asking you to, that's not your job. Do your job, I'll take care of the rest, and I'll show you some outcomes, maybe. So, you know what? I know that if you affect one person in your lifetime, you've done a really good job.
Right. And you've probably done a lot more than that.
And so have you. But we just worry about that one. Everything else falls into place.
The person in front of you at the time.
Yes, absolutely.
And the other thing about the wonder of the emergency department, and one of the reasons I think we're getting such good results, is we talk a lot about stages of change, and people thinking if they go to the emergency department, they're going to be so resistant and so difficult to work with. The emergency department is a wonderful place for opportunity.
Yes.
Because the coach has a lot of leverage. Well, if the person says, well, I don't really have a problem, you don't, then why are you here?
Yeah. Well, you were just brought back to life. So let's think about that.
And so there's a lot of leverage, and there's a tremendous window that seems to be opening up for coaches to convince people that now's the time to take a step towards recovery. And it happens. You're at like 96. We're very similar. 96% of the time, people are saying, you're right. Thank you. Can you help me?
Can you help me? Which is much different than, just a few years ago. All right, go. We don't have anything for you. You don't want, just leave the emergency room, and they're going 2 blocks over to score again. So, what have we done for them? Nothing.
Well, you wrote on their discharge plan, stop using heroin.
I have that paperwork, Phil. I actually have that paperwork. Don't do heroin again. It's like,
I know. It's
did
like,
you write this? You know, this is our discharge plan? It's maddening.
Yeah, well, people think it in some ways. It is logical, right?
Of-
It is logical. Stop using heroin. Like if you show up, stop eating McDonald's cheeseburgers and French fries, or you're going to have another heart attack.
Right.
People do it. What's the follow through? You gave them no solution. You just told them, and a lot of medical personnel don't understand why people don't act on that directive. You're treating them like an object. They don't understand the nature of the addiction. They don't understand the power behind needing to feel good and needing to feel better even. They don't understand how withdrawal from heroin is so awful to go through. Why would
Yes.
somebody?
But it won't kill you.
I know, but so what? Why would?
But
someone
that's
wanna go
what the
through
insurance company says. It won't kill you, so we don't have to have you in, a conducive environment.
So you go, Mr. Insurance Company, why don't you go into a room somewhere for 6 days and have the think of the worst flu you've ever had and multiply that by 20 times and see how willing you'd be to go through that.
Without a doubt. The
Oh
good
my
thing, the good news is though, with Catholic Health Systems, we're going to be I'm going to be working with them to really bring the aspect of what a family goes through to their residents. And over 3 years, we're going to be doing, addiction. They're going to be enmeshed in addiction treatment and the study for their residency. So hopefully it will change.
Hopefully.
Hopefully it will change. Phil, I can't believe we're done already. But this, you know what? We will have you and Art, your cohort, on again because you guys are absolutely amazing. God bless you. God, keep you safe because you have a lot of work to do, my friend.
I'm getting up there in age. I don't know how many years I got left, but we'll give it a go.
You got a lot of years left.
We'll give
You
it a
do.
go.
He'll
Okay,
keep you
thank you.
young. Thank you
All right.
so much for joining me tonight.
Take care.
You too. Thank you, everyone, for watching Resolutions for Recovery, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend.